Welcome to JS Online Tuitions. So in accounts today we'll be looking at adjustments to final accounts and we'll be looking at bad debts. So most of the sales that are carried out by businesses nowadays are on credit basis, and that means that these businesses, the risk for some of these funds not to be paid back. So when the funds have not been paid back that the business has to collect to its debtors, that is referred to as bad debts. So when a bad debt occurs, we have to make some recordings. In the recordings, we have to charge it as an expense in the income statement, and that means that the debtors figure, we're going to subtract it from the gross profit when we are calculating the net profit. And the double entry system for bad debts is that the first thing, you're going to credit the debtors account in the sales ledger, and the second thing that you're going to do is that you're going to debit the bad debts account. And there are many scenarios that can make a debt to be bad. So the first thing is whereby the debtor refuses to pay part of the invoice, or the debtor refuses to pay one of the invoice, or when the business for the debtor stops to function, or when the business declines. So these are the scenarios for bad debts. So I've said that there are the double entry system for bad debts. So we have to know the double entry system when we are dealing with bad debts. So I've said the first thing that you're supposed to do here, you're supposed to credit the debtors account, supposed to credit the debtors account in the sales ledger so that you can cancel out that figure. Then the second thing that you're supposed to do is to debit the bad debts account. And I've said the reasons that might cause bad debts is when the debtor fails to pay one of the invoices, or when the debtor fails to pay part of the invoice, or when the business declines. So when the business for the customer declines. So these are some of the reasons that might cause bad debts. And I've said for the bad debtors amount that you're going to have, so the total for the bad debt, so you can say bad debt total have to be transferred as an expense. So as an expense in the income statement, and that means that you're going to subtract the bad debts from the gross profit when calculating net profit. So subtract the bad debts from gross profit when calculating net profit. So I'll give an example. For example, if we have this account for Musa, we have this data, we have the account for Musa there, and Musa is our debtor. So we can say debt details folio debit credit. This year is 2023, and the month there, if we say 9th of January, if we sold goods to Musa on credit, and that amounted to 90 kwacha. That amounted to 90 kwacha. And if we say that this amount is going to be determined as bad debts at the end of the accounting period, so which means that we are supposed to remove this 90 kwacha. And how we are going to remove this 90 kwacha? We are going to credit the account for Musa, and we are going to debit bad debts account. So here we're going to say on the 31st of December, we say bad debts amounting to 90. So which means that we have cancelled out that figure, and that account won't exist. And to complete the double entry, we are supposed to debit bad debts account. So here you can say bad debts. So you can say debt details folio debit credit. We have kwacha, the year is 2023. So to complete the double entry there, we're going to say 31st of December, we'll say, we'll put Musa there, we're going to debit by 90 kwacha. And in the same month there, which is 31st of December, we can say profit and loss. We're going to credit profit and loss by 90 kwacha. So we're supposed to show the 90 kwacha under expenses. So in the income statement, how we're going to show that? So if we have the income statement, if we have this income statement, we know that we are using our kwacha there. And for the income statement, if we are calculating net profit, but we're going to start with gross profit. And if we have this figure, which is amounting to X, so we are supposed to treat bad debts as an expense. So we'll say less expenses there, and we say bad debts amounting to 90 kwacha. So we'll put our 90 kwacha there in brackets. So that's how you can treat the bad debts. Where you have questions, please ask in the group. So let us now look at an allowance for doubtful debts. So an allowance for doubtful debts is just an estimation from the debtors figure that's going to be bad at the end of the accounting period. And we are going to look at the double entry system for an allowance for doubtful debts. So for example, if the allowance is made in the first year or the first time, so what do we do? So the first thing is that we're going to debit the profit and loss account, and we are going to credit the allowance for doubtful debts account. That's if the allowance is being made for the first time. Let us look at another instance. If there's an increase in allowance for doubtful debts, so what do we do? So we debit the profit and loss account, then we credit the allowance for doubtful debts account. Let us look at another instance. If there is a reduction in allowance for doubtful debts, so what do we do? So we just do the opposite when we have an increase in allowance or doubtful debts. So in this case, we are going to debit the allowance for doubtful debts account, and we are going to credit the profit and loss account. So let us write down these points. So we are looking at allowance for doubtful debts. So if you're making this for the first time, for the first time, what do we do? So the first thing here, we're going to debit the profit and loss account and loss account with the figure of allowance there of doubtful debts. Then the other thing that we're going to do is that, so we're going to debit the profit and loss account, then we're going to credit the allowance for doubtful debts account. So this is the double entry system, and I'm going to give this example that is going to help us understand this point. So for example, in the year, let's say example, so in the year 2020, we expected that the accounts receivable there, we expected that the accounts receivable at the end of the accounting period, the account receivable will be 10,000 kwacha, and we expected to make an allowance of doubtful debts of 2% from this figure, which is 10,000 kwacha from accounts receivable after deducting the bad debts. So we are expected to make 2% of allowance for doubtful debts. So what do we do? So the first thing you have said that we're going to debit the profit and loss account. So we can write down the profit and loss account. So you can say profit and loss. So we have debt there, we have details, we have folio, we have debit, we have credit. So we are having our kwacha there, we're having a kwacha, the year is 2020. So we can see 31st December there. We can see allowance for doubtful debts. So we're supposed to debit that figure. So we're supposed to find 2% of 10,000. 2% of 10,000 there, we're going to have 200 kwacha. So we're going to debit our 200 kwacha in the profit and loss account. Then we're supposed to credit the allowance of doubtful debts. So let us do that. So this is allowance for doubtful debts account. So there we are supposed to credit that account. So we see our kwacha there, we have our kwacha. The year is 2020, that's 31st of December there. So we can say profit and loss, we're going to credit that figure by 200. So let us show those figures in the income statement. So income statement. So in the income statement, what we're going to do, we're going to say gross profit. So if you have gross profit of X there, then you have an allowance for doubtful debts, which is 200 kwacha. So we'll say less expenses, and our expenses there, we're going to have allowance for doubtful debts, which is 200 kwacha. So we're supposed to subtract that from the gross profit. So that's going to be our procedure. Then in the balance sheet, let us record that transaction in the balance sheet. So in the balance sheet there, we're going to have current assets, and under current assets there we have the debtors figure or accounts receivable. So we can say accounts receivable. So we have accounts receivable of 10,000 kwacha. So accounts receivable of 10,000 kwacha. So we are supposed to subtract this 200 from accounts receivable. So we can say less allowance for doubtful debts, which is 200 kwacha, and that means that we're going to have 9,800. So that's how you can record these allowance of doubtful debts of 2% when we have accounts receivable of 10,000 kwacha. Where you have questions, please ask in the group. So let us continue looking at the allowance for doubtful debts. Let us look at the other instance when there is an increase in allowance of doubtful debts. And we have said that the double entry system is going to be debit the profit and loss account and credit the allowance of doubtful debts account. So let us write down this double entry system. So the double entry system is that the first thing is that you're going to debit the profit and loss account. Then the second thing that you're going to do is that you're going to credit the allowance for doubtful debts account. Doubtful debts account. So as you know that at first we actually gave an example, and we have said that, for example, if at the end of the year, which was 2020, we had accounts receivables after deducting bad debts amounting to 10,000, and if the allowance for doubtful debts in that year was 2%, that means that 2% of 10,000 we had 200 kwacha. So that was the allowance for doubtful debts. So we had that example. So we are going to continue with that example, but if we consider that in the following year, which is 2021, that at the end of 31st December, which is 2021, that there is an estimation that there will be an increase in the allowance of doubtful debts, in the sense that the accounts receivable after deducting the bad debts will be 12,000, but the percentage is going to be maintained at 2%. That means that 2% of 12,000, we're going to have 240 kwacha. That means that there is an increase in allowance of doubtful debts by 40 kwacha, since at first it was at 200 kwacha, and in the year 2021 it will be 240 kwacha. So what are we going to do? What are we going to show in the profit and loss account? What are we going to show in the allowance of bad debts, in the allowance of doubtful debts account? What are we going to show in the income statement, and what are we going to show in the balance sheet? So let us look at this example. So I've said that considering the same example that we did at first, if we say that at the end of the year, at the end of the following year, which is 31st December 2021, there will be an increase in allowance of doubtful debts. In doubtful debts of 2%. So we are maintaining the percentage, which is 2% of accounts receivable after deducting the bad debts is 12,000. So we have at the end of the following year, which is the 1st December 2021, there will be an increase in allowance of doubtful debts of 2%. So we are maintaining the percentage, but the accounts receivable after deducting the bad debts has now increased to 12,000 from 10,000. So how do we show those transactions? So the first thing there that we're going to do, we're going to say 2% of 12,000, we are having 240 kwacha, and at first we had 200 kwacha. So you can see from this calculation that there is an increase in allowance of doubtful debts with 40 kwacha. So what are we going to record in the profit and loss account? What are we going to record in the allowance of the doubtful debts account? What are we going to record in the gap statement? And what are we going to record in the balance sheet? So let us look at these accounts. So the first one, we're going to have profit and loss account. So we're going to say debt details, folio, debit and credit. So we're having our kwacha there, we're having our kwacha, the year it's 2021. So we're going to say that 1st of December. That 1st of December there, then we'll say allowance for doubtful debts. So we are going to debit the profit and loss account with 40 kwacha. Since there is an increase with 40 kwacha, so we're just going to put a 40 kwacha. So that's going to be the profit and loss account. Let us look at the allowance for doubtful debts. Doubtful debts account. So what are we going to show in this account? So we have debt, we have details, we have folio of debit, we have credit. So the first thing that we are going to do there, it is first. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to say on the 1st of June. So we're going to say 1st of June, we're going to say balance brought forward. So the balance brought forward will be 200 kwacha from the previous accounting period, since we had 200 kwacha. So we're supposed to record that, and it was on the credit side, so we're going to put a 200 kwacha. And in the year which is 2021, we have been told that the allowance of doubtful debts is to be maintained at 2%, but the debtors figures increased to 12,000. And if we say 2% of that amount, we are having 240. So there we are supposed to show an increase of 40 kwacha. So we are going to say 31st of December, we'll say profit and loss. And it increased by 40 kwacha. So there we can find the total there. So which means we're going to have 240 on the credit side and 240 on the debit side. So we are supposed to find the balance carried down there, which will be 240 on the debit side, and you're supposed to find the balance brought down, which is 240 on the credit side. So that's how you can show the allowance for doubtful debts account. Where you have questions, please ask in the group. So let us look on how we are going to show that in the income statement. So in the income statement, we are only going to show the amount that had increased, which is 40 kwacha. So that's the amount that we're going to record under expenses. So you can say, we have a kwacha, and you can say gross profit. If you have gross profit of X there, then we have expenses. And the expenses that we are going to show there, that's less expenses. So it's an increase in allowance. An increase in allowance. So it's just supposed to show a 40 kwacha. So we're going to subtract a 40 kwacha. That's how you can show the income statement. Let us look at how we're going to show the balance sheet. So the balance sheet, we have our kwacha, and we know that the thing that is affected there is the current assets. So for the current assets there, we have accounts receivable. So accounts receivable, the figure we're having 12,000. So we can say our 12,000 there. So we are supposed to subtract the allowance for doubtful debts. And the amount that we're going to get the full amount, which is 240. That's the amount that we're supposed to subtract. So less increase. Allowance for doubtful debts. That amounted to 240 there. So 12,000 minus 240, we're going to have 11,760. So that's how you can show the profit and loss account. That's how you can show the allowance for doubtful debts account. That's how you can show the income statement in the balance sheet when there's an increase in allowance of doubtful debts. We have questions, please ask in the group. So let's look at this other scenario when there's a reduction in allowance for doubtful debts. So what do we do? So the thing that we do is just the opposite when there's an increase in allowance for doubtful debts. So we are going to debit the allowance for doubtful debts account, and we are going to credit the profit and loss account. That means that that figure is going to be shown as gains, and we're going to add it to the gross profit. So the first thing that I've said that we're going to do, we are going to debit the allowance for doubtful debts. Then we are going to credit the profit and loss account. So that means that you are going to show it as gains, and you're going to add that figure, that amount, to gross profit. So we're going to continue from where we ended from the previous year, and from the previous year we are looking at the year 2021. So for the year ended, so year ended 31st December 2022. So this is the following year. We assume that there will be a reduction in allowance for doubtful debts. So if we say that the amount for accounts receivable after deducting the bad debts will be 10,500, and the allowance for doubtful debts is maintained at 2%. So what figure for allowance of doubtful debts are we going to have for the year 2022? So to do that, we're going to say 2% of 10,500. So we can just say 2 over 100 multiplied by 10,500. So we are going to have 210. And we know that in the year 2021 we had 240, but in the year 2022 we are having 210. So as you can see there is a reduction in allowance of doubtful debts of amount of 30 kwacha. So how are we going to show those figures in our accounts? So the first thing that we're going to do is to debit the allowance for doubtful debts. So we're going to say allowance for doubtful debts So we're going to have our debt there, we're going to have our details, we're going to have our folio, we're going to have our debit, we're going to have our credit. And we know that the allowance for doubtful debts has a credit balance. So we can say 2022. So first of January there, we can say balance brought forward. We know that in the year 2021 we had 240, so we can put our 240 there. Since there is a reduction, we have to debit the allowance for doubtful debts there. So we can say 31st of December, say profit and loss of amount of 30 kwacha. So there we can find the total there. So the total we're going to have 240 on the credit side and 240 on the debit side. So we're supposed to find the balance carried down. Supposed to find the balance brought down. So there, to find the balance carried down, we're going to have 210 there on the debit side, and the balance brought down, we're going to have 210 on the credit side. So that's how we can show the allowance for doubtful debts. Where you have questions, please ask the group. Let us look at the profit and loss account. So we know this is 2022, we have our kwacha there, we have our kwacha. Then we can say that 1st of December there. So we are going to credit the profit and loss account with 30 kwacha, which is the reduction in allowance of doubtful debts. Let us look at how we are going to show that figure in the income statement. So in the income statement, we're going to have gross profit. Then we're going to say add gains. And since there is a reduction, we're supposed to add that figure. So reduction in allowance. So if we have gross profit of X, so reduction in allowance, that's 30. So we're supposed to add a 30 kwacha. So that's how you can show the income statement. Let us look on how we can show the balance sheet. So when you are looking at the allowance for doubtful debts, we know that the account that is affected is the accounts receivable. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to say current assets. So we're going to say accounts receivable amounted to 10,500. So we have 10,500, and you're supposed to subtract the allowance. And the allowance for the year 2022 is 210. So we're going to say 210. Or when we say 10,500 minus 210, we're going to have 10,290. So that's how you can show the balance sheet. So that's all about the bad debts and the allowance for doubtful debts, and when there's a reduction and when there's an increase in allowance of doubtful debts. Where you have questions, please ask in the group. Thank you, and I'll meet you next time. So this program has been brought to you by Jos Wale. If you want to get connected with me, you can actually check out my social media platforms. I'll meet you next time, and peace and God bless.